What's happening, everybody, and welcome to today's edition of SWAC Talk, the show where we cover the SWAC inside and out. I'm your host, Charles Wells, aka C Wells, coming at you on this Sunday with another edition of the Spring 2021 season recap. And if you look at the bottom of the screen, you already know that we're covering Jackson State today. The Tigers had a successful season on the field. They were 3-3 on the field, 4-3 with the Alcorn opt out forfeit. So we'll talk about their season a little bit and we'll go through that. Before we do that, obviously the descriptions below contain the social media pages: facebook.com/swagtalk, twitter.com/swagtalk76, instagram.com/swagtalk, and swagtalk76@gmail.com is the email address. Go ahead and get those a like, a follow, or whatever it is. And then come back here. I think at this point the page is now up to 163 subscribers. So I'd like to thank everybody from the bottom of my heart for the support. We're continuing to grow, and I'm really enjoying doing this for you guys, and I'm enjoying the love and feedback that I'm getting. So, if you haven't subscribed already, why don't you go ahead and hit that subscription button, hit the notification bell to be alerted to any content that I upload because I do upload content on Wednesdays and Sundays. With anything else dropping any random day when things happen. Wednesdays are our Swag Talk Time Machine episodes up until we begin our fall season previews. Sundays will contain our spring 2021 season recaps up until the time of the fall season previews. So this week is Jackson State. Next Sunday is my second favorite team, Mississippi Valley Delta Devils. We'll be covering them on next Sunday. Next Wednesday is Swag Talk Time Machine. 2004 SWAC championship game, Alabama State and Southern. Um, SWAC Talk podcast also drops an episode today covering Jackson State in more detail on their spring 2021 season. So go ahead and check that out. Anchor.fm/SWAC Talk. Show can be also heard on Spotify, Stitcher, Breaker, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. SWAC Talk, one word, SWACTALK. So go ahead and check that out. Now, with all that out of the way, let's talk about Jackson State. Like I said, they finished 4-3 on the season, 3-2 in conference. They were 2-2 at home. Excuse me, 3-2 at home, 2-1 on the road. So they obviously a winning season, a non-losing season, however you want to look at it. Whether you want to just include that forfeit, which I do because obviously everybody includes that as their record. That gives them a winning record at 4-3. But even if you take that out, they still had a non-losing season at 3-3 at 500 season. So that's a successful season. Obviously, there were some people who spun narratives that this team would go undefeated because of Deion Sanders and the talent that they brought in. Those people did not realize that the bulk of those guys that came in were not going to be eligible to play in the spring. Those guys would be here in the fall. So that team in the fall and this team in the spring are obviously two different entities. I thought that this team carried themselves well in the spring at the beginning of the season. They jumped out on Edward Waters 53-0, which is what you're supposed to do. They beat Grambling 33-28. They made some big plays in that game. They had a little bit of luck, but luck, you need luck to win games at times. But they also did fumble late in the game going in to score against Grambling. So that was a game that they probably could have won by more. But they still were able to win it. They forced that fumble against Grambling, so they made the winning play. Against Valley, they did what you had to do against a team like Valley. You knock them out the box early, and then you just do what you got to do in the second half. They won that game 43-7. I said before they beat Grambling to score with 33-28. They went to Montgomery and got ambushed a little bit. Alabama State jumped on them early. Jackson State was able to claw their way back into the game. And it came down to the end. They gave up a big touchdown, but then they came down and scored. Jalen Jones committed a crucial penalty that gave Alabama State some better field position. Ezra Gray ran a long touchdown to basically seal that game. They lost their game 35-28, which would be their first loss of the season. They came out after a bye week against Southern and lost 34-14 in a game that probably was closer at times than what the score indicates, but then at the same time, it wasn't as close as the score indicates. I thought they played well in the first half, but they wore down in the second half. They just could not make enough plays on offense, and defensively, they just could not stop the run that did them in that game. They came back against Alabama A&M. Quincy Casey got the start, and he put on a show. You know what I mean? There's no other way to put it. Obviously, they didn't win the game, but I thought he represented himself well as a kid who hadn't had a lot of on-field experience. He threw the ball really, really well, but he was outdueled by Akil Glass, who threw for 6 touchdowns and ran for another. And then won that game 52-43. And then they closed out their season with a 2-0 forfeit over Alcorn due to Alcorn opting out. And their final game against Prairie View was canceled due to Prairie View having COVID issues. So Jackson State was, I think, the only team who played the bulk of their schedule. They played 7 out of their 8 games that they had scheduled. So that was number one. That's a success in and of itself to be able to play all your games and not have any issues with your team with COVID. The only game that they had to cancel that wasn't, an opt out was because of somebody else's COVID issue. So that's a successful season in and of itself to be able to play all of your games, pretty much all but one. So I thought they, the staff, the athletic staff, the coaching staff, the players, the university as a whole, all need to be saluted for that because obviously when you look at some teams they only played a couple games all year, so to be able to get that kind of time in, I think is a big bonus and a big plus. You got to salute them for that because that's that didn't happen often for teams and to play 8 games instead of 6 and still get to play 7. I thought that was a good thing. Offensively, they averaged about 36 and a half points per game. They allowed 26 as a defense. They had a total offense of total offense of 416 yards per game. They threw the ball for about 260 yards per game. Ran the ball for 167. So they, offensively, they did a good job of moving the ball. When you have, 2 different quarterbacks who do things 2 different ways, they were able to move the ball in both ways. Running game, Tyson Alexander was the leading rusher before he got hurt late in the season. Santee Marshall came in and had a good game against Alabama A&M. Kimani Clark was a guy I thought would have a better season. He kind of got lost in the shuffle. I think he got injured a little bit, but didn't really play that much. Dalen Baldwin stepped up big time as a big time receiver. He had 7 touchdowns, averaged 90 yards per game. He had 20 yards per reception. Warren Newman, another guy who really excelled, a NOLA kid, 35 receptions, over 200 yards. I think he had 5 touchdowns himself. Corey Reed, they had a three-headed monster receiver who made plays. I mean, this was a team who had some talent. So this was not like, they weren't scrubs like some people started to act like the team was at the end of the season, but they weren't world beaters like some people thought they would be at the beginning of the season. But this is a team who was able to pick up some wins and play and beat in every game that they played. Obviously, one game ended with a bigger margin, but they were in that game for the both of it. Defensively, Keontae Hampton is a guy who I always loved as a linebacker. Um, Aubrey Miller is a monster at linebacker. That kid is a beast. He's big, he's strong, he's fast, and he hits. He's not scared to hit. He'll rough you up. The defensive line I was not impressed with. They did bring in some pieces, but they didn't. The guys that they brought in and played, I didn't think they did so well. But they have some pieces coming in the fall that's gonna make that line even better. Probably make it be one of those lines like Jackson State is used to having. The secondary, C.J. Holmes, Deshaun Warren, Gladney, those guys, they played well. Obviously, you got Shiloh Sanders coming in the fall, so it's gonna be tough to throw against the defense, but they're gonna have to be more physical against the run to keep teams from, because teams are gonna have to run the ball. I don't know how many teams are gonna actually test this secondary, so it's gonna be important for the line to get a good push. They did have, I think, 16 sacks as a team, so they did a good job early in the season of getting pressure on quarterbacks. But once they got into the later portions of the season, that line started to deteriorate a little bit and not get that kind of pressure again. And I think a lot of this attention came from the fact that this team got more attention than they're used to getting or that any SWAC team has been getting. So people who don't normally follow this team were able to see this team, and they, could not understand why that team that beat Edward Waters was not the team that to beat Southern or Alabama A&M, and that's just different levels of competition. I mean, they're competitive. I mean, 2019 they lost to Southern by 6 points, and they were beating Alabama A&M in the fourth quarter before Alabama A&M made a comeback. So these are teams that Jackson State was competing against in the fall, in previous seasons. So this is not like a team who didn't win any games and is looking to was expected to win more games. I think this was a team that would be better. I mean, obviously they had the fall of 2020. Who knows how things would have went? But this is not. This team is somewhere in the middle of all of these extremes that people had talked about. So um, obviously both quarterbacks have transferred out. Jalen Jones is at Mississippi Delta Community College. Um, Quincy Casey is at Alabama A&M. So most people pretty much feel like this is the Shador Sanders show to start in the fall. He has a ton of receivers coming in. He has a running back from Liberty coming in. They have weapons. They brought in some guys to beef up the offensive line because that was definitely a sore spot during the season. So obviously the pieces are there, and we're going to talk about this more in depth in our fall preview. But I'm not going to be the kind of person to just crown them. I do think they will be good in the fall, but it's hard to say until you see guys actually step out there and play together how things are going to go when the chips are down and you hit crunch time and adversity. And that goes for any team who brings in pieces. Teams are always going to be predicted to do this and that. And then when the season starts, it don't happen because everybody can't handle when those live bullets are flying around. So I think they'll be good. And like I said, I'm not going to go too much in depth of what the fall is. And that's what made this episode a little bit more tougher for me because it's harder for me to talk about what this team did in the spring because a lot of what they did is not going to really matter because they are looking forward to showing what they have in the fall. So to me, this was more like a preseason for them, an opportunity for them to get some live coaching experience, some live reps on the field, and a better chance than having 15 spring practices to see who can play and who can't. And I thought that's what they did. And now they're bringing in better pieces, you know, more pieces. They're kind of trimming the roster and reshaping it. So this was not a lot to take from this season. It was just an opportunity to get out and play games and make some money for the university and obviously get some games on TV, which was a huge boon for the SWAC. Not only did you get those Jackson State teams on TV, but you got a couple other SWAC schools on TV, and a couple guys got to be promoted and showcased that may not have been showcased on a ESPN3 basis. So this is pretty much not a lot to take from it. There were a lot of narratives that was fun that probably aren't really true. Like I said, this team is somewhere in the middle of what the of both extremes. Like with most things, the reality is kind of in the middle of everything. So we'll see how this team does in the fall. They have a really good first game on tap against the Rattlers of Florida A&M in Miami. So there's gonna be a lot of hype and there's gonna be a lot of attention, and it's gonna be important for these guys to be able to navigate and handle that. So with that being said, I'm Charles Wells, aka C Wells, host of Swag Talk. I'm signing out. I'll see you guys Wednesday for another edition of the Swag Talk Time Machine. And Sunday, we'll be back with another spring 2021 recap as I recap my number 2 team, the Delta Devils of Mississippi Valley. And we'll see you guys then. We're out.